Okay, back at this scene. I keep getting distracted with various issues and to-dos while doing this one. The last one was my memory card ran out of memory on this one. It was taking, I guess, longer than I thought. I kind of lost track of time on the total duration I had been working on this to this point. And because I keep having to stop and go. But anyway, that being said, okay, that's fine. But all of the inks that I've applied on my last segment of this video have dried now, so I can't take advantage of kind of the more kind of damp pulp of the paper in those areas in which that color was applied. So what I'm doing is I just took a peach Bellini, which is a Adirondack light color. It's kind of like a beige, like a warmer tinged hue in a very light value because it was a shadow stamping ink. Okay, so I'm just going to I just took the reinker and I've just sopped it up in one of my tips here. This tip here is really old, I can tell, because it's more of their dense kind of style of foam that ClearSnap used to use, and it looks like it ripped off the edge there. Probably a 20-year-old tip. I don't know, maybe 15, I don't know. Quite old, though. But when you use the reinkers in this fashion, okay, and you just sop it up in the sponge here, as I mentioned before in a video or two, but it essentially makes your stylus tool wand here kind of like a stamp pad on a stick, you know. And it's just it's a really good tool to use if you want to apply, you know, a decent amount of color. All right, it's like a paintbrush or something like that, but it's absorbent though, and that foam tip is a really nice tool by which to transfer that ink over to the page. All right, now this color is looking pretty good, but it's also kind of reinvigorating the saturation and intensity of the previous colors because it's just making them wet again. Okay, it looks really dull over here in this section because that ink has dried. And what I've found with certain types of papers, the Ranger Industries ones, can kind of dull out, but you can, I mean, when used in this manner, when dried. But the intensity is still there. You would just have to spray it in the end and then bring back all that vibrancy, okay? But I mean, this color right here, the Adirondack Light, is a Ranger Industry one too. But if you can notice, see over here where I've reapplied it, you can really see kind of the level of intensity there. It's not super bright because this is a really, you know, very light color, but just in general, it's turning brighter than kind of what it looks like when it's dry. Okay, I mean, this is a different color as well. It's not a super bright color, but it is not as bright as some of the colors that we'll be applying later, okay? So, that being said, what I'm doing is I'm applying these colors down here, and these will provide a nice foundation, and it's not making a gigantic commitment to the color scheme that will be applied over the top of these ones. So, okay, I'm not going to make these like, you know, these areas all brown or something like that. This is just your foundation coat of color on which to build. All right. Okay, that looks pretty good, I think. I'm trying to think if I want to apply more. I have a lot of cool areas in here with that blue that was laid down, but maybe I'll go over them and kind of have a, I don't know, a different temperature up here, just in general, though. It still relates to the blue down here because it's even if I go over it with this one, it'll still be incorporated in with the surrounding area. Now I'm just looking up in the sky area such. Maybe I'll go for a little bit more of a warmer tinge up here. Peach Bellini is a pretty good one. You can, it's so light, you can merge it with its opposite temperature and it's fine, okay? You can do that if something is light enough, okay? Now that being said, Adirondack lights have been discontinued, but you can do this with other types of hue or lines of ink, okay? Like the distress inks, okay? Like an old paper or something like that, that we laid down here before. So, just remember that there's plenty of options still out there. There's so many more inks available, a lot of lines of inks and companies are disappearing, but there's a lot more still now than there used to be years and years and years ago. Okay. And even before all those different choices were out there, there was still an adequate amount to do pretty much whatever you wanted to do. Might have to play around with some colors and dilute them a little bit, but that's just to say that we have options these days. And if I didn't have the specific inks that I'm using here, for me, because I'm just kind of picking out the ones that I have, I don't have this kind of set formula in mind. It's just kind of the general concept, okay? All right, now, when I ran out of memory on this, right before I started today, I just kind of grabbed some general colors in the color scheme that I believe that I'll be applying to the various areas and objects and spaces on the scene. And I put them right out in front of me, so these types of colors, you can get kind of the idea of the general color scheme. I think we'll work in some reds in here too. They don't have to be in pad form either, These days, from the time that I did this similar composition before, I don't think I had my alcohol ink pens at the time. I had some Studio 2 ones, but I don't know, those ones started going dry at some point in time, so I'm not sure if I used it or not. But we can use those in the mix as well, especially for something like this, where I don't have like vast areas to fill in. But I do want to put in some splashes of color in here too, I think, in the form of some different stamped objects. I'm not sure how it'll work out, though, because I've already kind of established a pretty heavy kind of value scheme in this ledge up here, but I'd like, from that picture that I was showing in my previous video from that book, there were some really bright reds and such on the rocks in the form of, I don't know, some kind of low-lying bush, probably some kind of bush that, I don't know, it probably changes colors as well. Okay, so let's see here. Let's start getting into some fun. This is where it's kind of starts, I kind of start being a little bit more, I don't know, not careful, but strategic, maybe, about my placement of color. Okay, I have too much ink in this one right here. Still, there's a lot of that Peach Bellini still in this pad. But, okay, so far I've used all my tones have been very light, and you can kind of do whatever, you saw me do that kind of that, real choppy type of application just to make a point, but now, okay, now this color right here, this is pear tart, here's some bamboo leaves. These aren't terribly dark or vibrant, intense colors, but it is a different color, so you kind of, what I do is I just kind of start applying it in a very light touch, okay? And I'll start applying it in the darker areas where that, the pure color won't be quite as apparent, all right, so fast, because I want to get a feel of it. When I move it into the areas that are lighter, we'll see more of the true color, so I'll kind of work it from dark to light, like this. I mean, it's not like, it's not precarious or anything like that. You just start in your darker areas and then work into it a little bit more. So see, it's just kind of warming it up a little bit. See that it's down right here, but over here you can see it's a little bit more dull. So here, so that's kind of the difference right there between here and here. Okay. All right. So not too much brighter at this point. So I get a feel for it, and I just start applying it accordingly. Well, what do you mean by that, accordingly? Well, any place that I want it to go, you know, I can just start, it's almost like painting it down into that area. I kind of am a little bit more patchy about it because this is a really light color still, so, but I still want a nice variation of light and dark, okay? Now, at some point in time, we start losing that a little bit because we've retained some lighter areas in here, but we do want to bring some colors into that area. So sometimes it just turns all mono value, okay? And that's where things like gel pens can bring out some of those more highlights in there. And remember, too, we still have some pens to go. So it doesn't mean be too gingerly, especially with the lighter tones, but do, you know, take into consideration other colors to come, and do try to retain some of that, you know, light, dark convention that we've established with our gray and black tones that we first laid down on here to establish the lighting of the scene. So, say, in other words, like areas like right in here where it's lighter, okay, I think it'd be a good idea to retain kind of that lightness in there, okay? So we can kind of over here, you know, see I'm getting some green down in here, but retain some areas, you know, don't just color everything, you know. But again, it's not like some kind of precarious type of exercise. I mean, I can go like this, you know. But just in general, be mindful of your lighting, which means just don't darken in everything, okay? And it's not just coloring, it's more of kind of selective coloring. So let's get a little color down here like this, okay? In these trees. Okay, but it's just not coloring in everything, and there's no set formula or kind of a strategy like, okay, on that tree you have to go on the right, you know, it's not like that. You just do put some somewhere and leave the rest untouched, okay? So it's not hard, you just have to oscillate it, okay? Sometimes it's a little bit harder in terms of, you know, kind of breaking habits though, you know, because if there's a tree there, we're used to saying, okay, that tree gets colored in with green. All right, but just use some green or something like that, and don't do the whole thing, okay? So just kind of putting on the brakes in terms of complete coverage with any given color. And that's pretty much it. It sounds simple, and it is a simple concept, but like I said, a lot of people are kind of in the habit of complete coverage over a given object or space within that object. Kind of coloring book style. You know, I love coloring books though too, so I'm putting those down. You have to do that more, you know, that kind of more of a coloring book style with stamps that are kind of more outline in nature as opposed to volume in nature. And I've seen a lot of, there are a lot of kind of scenic stamping designs that I've seen out there that are kind of more outlined in nature, and you just have to, you have to model them a lot more in order for them to incorporate into a given scene, unless you really want them to stand out in terms of an object. But you have to kind of more fully realize them on the user side to incorporate them into a design. And that's where you do more complete, kind of coloring, just to fill them out if they're lacking. Kind of the values and textures within a scene, within their forms. Okay, so that is pear tart. Memento pear tart. Let me see. Here, this one's a good one. Distressing peeled paint. Kind of a good green, huh? Alright, let's do the same thing. I'll go into my darker areas and kind of get a feeling for that. It's a little bit of a darker green than the peeled paint. Pear tart. This is peeled paint here. Kind of hitting it in the shadows. I'm kind of just going for this type of application. It's really small. Small, kind of narrow applications of that color. See, here's where the tree line is, right here, and underneath this tree line, I'm kind of putting a more kind of narrow band of that, of this color. A little bit more intense. I'm putting it in, where would be the shadows underneath those trees. Kind of coming up into some of the trees, maybe. Alright, let's carry some of that color scheme down into some of my rocks. I love textured rocks, and I love rocks in general. Anywhere I go hiking, if I have a choice, I like to go where there's a lot of rocks, like especially at the summits. I'm not really into. I'll take it, but I'm not really into hiking through like thick forests, with a lot of elevation change, and you're doing these switchbacks up and down it. Every switchback looks exactly the same, and the view that you can see is exactly the same from, the entire traverse or what, I don't know, the entire climb. So I like to get up on rocks. Rocks, there's typically a lot, a nice vantage point where you can overlook things. I really love that. Maybe that's why I liked Acadia so much. It's so rocky. When I first went to Maine and was driving to the store that I was to teach at, it's like I could see, oh, okay, I get it. I can tell that's why there's so many lobster out here. It's all that rock. Alright, that is peeled paint. Fantastic, kind of aged looking green. Alright, this one is called Bamboo Leaves. It's kind of a warm green, kind of more what's the description? It's semi-mellow green. That's not a great description, but it's not so intense and bright. Okay, but it is dark. So I'll just kind of follow suit and add that down. It's not that much darker though. Okay, so that's the greens. And I don't know if there'd be so much green during fall, colors, but, hey. I think it'll look good in this color scheme, so that's where you just kind of have to take, your artistic license. It'd probably be more like yellows down there, Okay. All right. Coming around. Kind of see it starting to come into focus a little bit in terms of the color scheme and whatnot. All right, what do we have here? Butterscotch. I think I had it. All right, here's the Adirondack. I mean, not Adirondack, Distress Mustard Seed. All right. I just cleaned off my stylus tools. Not great, but enough. All right, so mustard seed. Now we're getting into our yellows now, so let's kind of start coming up into our trees a little bit more. It's not just the trees, but you know, if you're using this anywhere, you want to kind of incorporate it in with the other elements. So I'm bringing this down into the grass as well. Let's see if you can see that. Okay. All right. So not a full saturation. I mean, I'm applying it, but I'm taking it nice and slow. Kind of doing more of this type of application right there. It's a little kind of what, not this, you know, coloring in like that. You know, that's what I do. I don't know, personally. And that's just to, I'm doing that so I can retain some of those lighter areas on there, you know, for that value, that oscillation of value. Otherwise, everything will get kind of dark in the end if I you know, do things that way too quickly. But that being said, it's not like this process is slow either. Alright, now I'm gonna get too close to some of those things up here. I don't want this yellow in the water because it'll look too green. So I can just do kind of apply this in my kind of areas where there's going to be more of it. Or I can color in a larger area. But I don't know if this is really faster than an alcohol pen. Alcohol pens are really fast too. I can just color it right in there, but kind of for kind of a nice light application of it. That's where it, you know, this type of application style in terms of that little hatching motion come in handy. But you know, it's a little bit different application too. I mean, if you have alcohol pens and you've used them before, you know what I'm talking about in terms of the kind of those textures that kind of form. So this is kind of a nice foundation, you know, whether you're going to use those alcohol pens or not, you know, to get into those much more specific areas. Okay, so we have some trees up there, and I'm doing it down here as well on these trees. Okay, there's some trees kind of on the back side of our ridge here too that have kind of more of that yellowy type of color. Kind of put it here and there. This ledge for a little bit of continuity. It's kind of dry on here, so it's not, you know, a real bright version of that. But it kind of helps in the kind of the overall glow of this, in areas of this space. All right, so that was the mustard seed. How about butterscotch? I don't think I use this one very often. Maybe in sunsets or something like that. It's kind of like a kind of ochre-y looking tone. So, as far as this process goes, kind of the bottom line about it is I'm just kind of taking things, yeah, there's an incremental kind of layering process that I'm going through here. I'm not taking, these colors might end up, I do want, this to be a pretty visually stimulating piece in the spirit of, some really bright fall colors and kind of their full splendor and whatnot. But in order to get there, each step of the way, there's not really a gigantic change that we can see with each incrementally darker, brighter hue that's being applied. So, and that's why I like it. I like to move through these kind of intermediate tones between a light one and a medium one. If I have a light medium color in between that I can work in there. And it doesn't all have to be the same, color scheme, too. You can mix and match with just some basic kind of knowledge of colors. Like, for example, if I'm going with yellows and I want to get to red, you can use a yellow and a pink or something like that, because that pink and that yellow will mix to form a red. The only time you'll see pink is if you put it over kind of a white piece of paper, but if you're putting pink over yellows, it won't really read as that kind of original hue, because these are transparent colors again, and the colors underneath will always show through and influence what we see on the surface. So these are like transparent overlays that we're almost, kind of doing here in various values of it, because we'll use more of a certain color in a given area than, than another area. All right, so kind of getting there. That was the caramel. Now, after all what I said about, those pads, I could barely see what was happening with that caramel at all. All right, Potter's Clay Orange, okay. Before I move into that one, let's try this ochre here. I think this ochre is a little bit darker and brighter than, you know, the caramel, or God, I can't remember. What was it? Butterscotch. Okay. Ochre's kind of like, you know, it's kind of like a butterscotchy color, though, isn't it? All right. It's kind of in that same spirit. Kind of going down here, it's almost like a Q-tip, you know, or something like that would be a good applicator as well. Yeah, the ochre's kind of moving into a little bit more of that orangey tinge, you know. There's certainly more kind of red in this ochre than that butterscotch. Okay, just kind of putting it all over a lot of that green that I laid down. Oops. I forgot something. See these trees? There's some kind of hint of some color or reflections down in that water, and I didn't apply some color down here. I won't move through all those different colors that I used in the actual trees up there, but let's get a little bit of color down there, okay, just so that we get this kind of mirroring of you know, the different color conventions that we're establishing with the objects, and following suit in their reflections. Okay, this is the pear tart again. Okay, so I put enough reflections down there in the design, but not too much, okay? Wanted it kind of broken up and more of a suggestion. I find that with deciduous trees or something like that, it's kind of easier just to kind of hint at some color in that water down there, because I don't know what, you know, kind of color scheme people are going to use for their waters, you know, when they eventually get it. So I just kind of designed with that kind of notion in mind of both uncertainty and flexibility, primarily. Okay, so there's some down there. It's a little bit more ochre down here in the water than up above, so I'll go a little bit more with that ochre up here. Oops. Whoa. Just dabbed that off on the top of that, but it wiped right off. I think it's because I put down some of that, what was peach Bellini up there, so it's still a little wet, so it just wiped right off for me. Okay, the ochre is now... The ochre, Marby pads in general are a little bit more intense than most lines of inks out there, so this one, there's a pretty visible change in appearance when I'm applying this down here. And the ink viscosity is thinner than a lot of inks too. It's still very rich. I'm not saying watery. It's dense with hue still. But that ink transfers and penetrates all the other colors that we've laid down here much faster. So that change is a lot more apparent with the Marby inks, which doesn't make them better for this. It just makes them kind of different. But I like them very much in conjunction with the inks that are a little more, that give you a little bit more time to spread around, okay? Because if I use those ones that are thicker and easier to spread around on a base, then they make my Marvy ones easier to spread around because the paper is already somewhat saturated, or at least coated with those thicker ones. So going thin into thick. So you get a little bit of, the best of both worlds. You get the intensity of the Marvy, but you get the, the spreadability of the thicker styles of ink, okay? So we're kind of utilizing them for, their strongest traits, but trying to lessen what could tend to be potentially, as far as the process goes, their weaknesses, okay? So if Marvies are very thin and we just start going into the same, we can do it, but the paper absorbs it much faster because the inks are thinner, okay? Which means you just have to be a little bit more kind of definitive, maybe, which is good for color schemes and things that you already are very familiar with. Before all these other pads were out there, and lines of inks, we were just only using Marvy, okay? But it's just easier these days with, Marvy plus something else. And you don't need Marvy, but it's just like anything else. I wouldn't be so brand specific. You can, if you like certain brands, sure. But I kind of get a little more color specific, so if there's a color that you like and will work for you better, and and if it's a matter of one or the other, everyone likes to have a complete set. It looks great to have them all kind of uniform and everything like that. But after some point in time, when it comes to storage and cost and everything like that, if there's a green, I've got all these pads of a certain brand and stuff, they look great in my pad holder, but it comes down to what colors are you going to use the most. And if there's a color that a green, between one green and another green or something like that, I would get the one that the color, get it for the color that you like best. Okay, this is Potter's Clay, moving into a straight orange now. Okay, some of this might turn into a red, so it doesn't have to remain orange, but we will use the orange as a base coat because a potential orange could be a little bit lighter than certain reds, okay? Just in general, as far as hue value goes. Alright, now being a little bit more selective, not putting it everywhere, because maybe I want some of those trees to remain nice and kind of yellowy, greenish yellow, okay. Now you wouldn't think about it either, but this orange I'm actually putting down underneath the trees into that grassy area, right? Now it doesn't look straight orange, it's not going to look like that orange right there, but because again I'm putting it over the top of the green, and the colors underneath are influencing what we see on the surface here, so actually nowhere that I apply it over green does it look any orange at all. Okay, alright. Alright. Okay, don't forget about my near trees. In the Sierras, out California, it's kind of more aspen-based colors, a lot of yellow. There are some places I don't know if they're native trees, but you know, where you do get more of the kind of the oranges and reds. But from what I've seen in the areas that I've been to, it's more kind of yellow in that aspen color. Okay, so let's see, let's try some of this orange up in here. It's like I said, you kind of barely see kind of it influencing. Okay, there's a little bit more yellow down here because, you know, there was an area that was lighter, you know, that I've retained some of the lightness of the paper. Might not be pure white, but it's just lighter, okay, so it's not so coated. Alright, so, I'm starting to move up into the area where it's starting to get a little bit more muddled, okay, that's where the, my gel pens will come into play. Alright. I'm trying to think of what color I want. You know, I was mentioning that pink. Let's try some pink in here, okay? Here's a rosemary. It's a fairly light, but pretty bright pink, okay? Now, I do remember some pinks, you know, when hiking around. Not that pink, you know, I wouldn't want that, but again, where I layer this into, yeah, that's exactly what I want. I don't want to go straight to red, okay? But it's giving me a reddish hue over the top of my yellow. And it's kind of a real mellow, you know, pale reddish tinge. Alright, this is starting to, the color scheme at least is really starting to come around now. See that? That's what I needed in there. But, I kind of had to build up a little bit to get into that color scheme. As you can see, I'm not doing it too fast. It's, what it looks like is going like this, you know, kind of doing a little, like, squiggle like that, here and there. This is like an extension of my fingers if I was doing a little bit of, you know, like finger painting or something on there. Kind of, that's the general spirit of it. putting some of this onto the rocks here, right around that lichen area. It's just kind of a little smear of some colors here and there. Okay, see how that really incorporates in with the textures of that image. So this is what those image and that texture was applied to that design for. So you can leave it as is, and it would give it would describe the kind of the volume of the rock. It also provides shading and variation within that rock. And it can provide potentially some different types of color options for that rock without it looking like, kind of a weird color that's just been placed on there. So it's kind of a transitional thing. So ideally that's what you want out of different types of things like that. You want, with rocks, is they're usually kind of thought of in a secondary type of consideration when applying into a scene, but for me, they're some of the most important aspects of it, because that's what kind of our things are built on, structurally within a composition. If those rocks aren't right, they can stand out as something too definitive, like bowling balls or something like that within a scene. You want them to kind of disappear where you don't actually look at them. But again, as far as that kind of foundation within a piece, they often provide things like the textural contrasts with things like grasses and trees and those things that are softer. But they can be really strong anchor points. And I don't know. Insignificant, this one's not insignificant because this whole side is a ledge, but kind of within the parts of it. You want to kind of treat them a little bit differently so that you get rid of kind of the monotony of similar patterns within a given space. Okay, so I'm looking. I'm not sure if I should use this time. This is what's going through my head right now. Okay, I don't have a ton of pink colors out there. I think I have 3. Maybe 4 if you include the Adirondack Lights shell pink, but like this pink right here is really, really bright. Okay, so if you have a super bright color or a lot darker than the one that you previously used, like that color right there, it's almost like day glow pink or something like that, okay? What you do is you tap off a lot. Now I really soaked it in just to make a point here, but see, I'm tapping this off where it becomes more of a drier application of that given color. So instead of going for that color right there, or that value of that color, I'm using this value of that color, okay? So any color that you happen to have, this is the good thing, any color that you have from, the darkest color in black, you should be able to tap it off, and the more you tap it off, the more dry it becomes on here, and that as a result, when you apply it to your page, is a much lighter version of that color. So you should be able to get any value from the most intense version of a given color used in its full saturation to a very light one all the way to white. And you get that all out of one pad, okay? So I should be able to get a light version of that very, very bright pink and make it work for me. Okay? And plus, if you have any color and you're kind of uncertain about it, just put a very light version of that down. Not just for scenic stamping, for anything. Yeah. And if you like it, then you can always apply more. But if you don't like it, it's not, you didn't make a gigantic commitment to that given hue, or value of it, or intensity of it. Okay, so that's working for me pretty good. I think I took off a little bit too much, though. Alright, so let's kind of tap it off a little bit. Oh, it looks so red in that given space, just because it's over the top of all those other colors, so it doesn't look pink at all. It's more of like an earthy red. Kind of doing a little bit more of a squiggle type of application now. Which gives me kind of a soft application of it. I need a little cairn up here on the rocks. A cairn or a duck. I don't know how you spell them. C-A-I-R-N or something like that, but they're the markers, the trail markers, when there really isn't a trail. Like a designated one, like a dirt trail or something like that. But if you're just walking along kind of rocks, there's, people put up piles of rocks to designate your way, and, within eyesight of the, the next one, there'll be a next one. But they build these cairns differently in, I don't know if it was just Acadia or Northeast or something like that. But they put two rocks and then there's one going across it, like a little, I don't know, structure or something like that. Out here in the West, it's just a pile of rock on top of another, like a snowman or something like that. So a lot of desert hiking that I did, and a lot of those types of hikes, unless it's a really famous one, like some national park or something like that, you're just kind of following and trying to, find the next cairn if you're kind of out in the middle of nowhere, and especially if you're hiking on your own. Sometimes you're really kind of looking out for the cairn. There may or may not be one, but usually people are pretty good about kind of establishing that. On some of these hikes that I did, there were, sometimes people might not be out there for a month or two. I don't know. But I never saw anyone else. But kind of always looking around. You don't worry about that in Acadia or anything like that. These, a lot of those hikes were, like 3/4 of a mile or something like that. There's no question, which way to go back to the car if you kind of got a little bit lost. Alright, so this pink is working out pretty good. Every time I'm kind of wondering, pink, I'm not, sure. It looks really good in here. I think better than just going straight into the red. I don't know. It looks really red, and as opposed to that pink over the top of this orange and green and ochre and yellow and all that. It looks more red than I thought it would. So this little, spots of that kind of more intense red, because I want to kind of oscillate intensities. I want it bright, dull, dark, light, if possible. And that's where I mentioned don't color in everything uniformly. Okay, let's see. All right, let me try to get a little bit of this down on those reflections down there, okay? I usually try to make the reflections a little bit more dull than the objects that they are reflecting. This will just be kind of a hint of those colors within that given reflection, okay? So pretty light. I can come down to that water a little bit more because that pink kind of naturally blends in with the blue night, you know, in terms of creating kind of more of a violet, so that's working out pretty good. Alright, I'm getting a little muddled over here where I'm kind of lacking some of those contrasts, so we'll come back into that with our gel pens and designate some things. You want that intensity down there, but you just want to be able to define some sharper looking, you know, more defined objects. And that's where I'll usually stamp another image in there as well, too. Maybe some bare trees or something like that. I like the leafless limbs small one a lot, too. Okay. I like seeing, watching things kind of coming into focus. Color schemes being resolved, lighting schemes being resolved. And right now in the process, the color scheme, after all those colors are starting to be, you know, I'm starting to see kind of the general, I don't know, concept, I guess, you know, in terms of fall colors at least. The concept of, you know, the notion of what this would be, okay? Bright fall foliage and, you know, Acadia in its full autumn splendor starting to reveal itself. I am using a lot more of this red than I thought I might this time, but I think it looks good, so I'm just applying more. But I was going to kind of keep some of the things a little bit more yellow, like it was in my photo. But I think this reddish tinge is, you know, this area is kind of benefiting from that more than kind of just the straight yellow, so. Applying quite a bit of it. Strategically, not over everything again. Okay, so we have it down there. See right down here, it's kind of turning dark, so we'll bring out some of those trunks with some gel pen or something like that. Yeah, right. Yeah, it's really... This is red, by the way. It's just Marvy. It's just called red, you know. It's just their basic red. It's kind of a little bit more of a warm red. I wouldn't say it's kind of like a Christmas red. It's more of kind of a deeper, kind of neutral cranberry red. This red over the top of some of these yellows and ochres because it has such a deep kind of glow now as a result of having those base layer colors applied down there. So we have a lot of those distress ink, browns and whatnot as well. Let's see, down here, kind of in this area, see that kind of glow happening there? Okay, I'm bringing some of this red down in here. Red lichen. It just, I want some of that hue down in this, this area somewhere. I don't know if I'll do that kind of bush and leaves down here because the black will show right through it. Because it'd be transparent. But let me see how this works here. This is really starting to come together, though. Color scheme-wise. All right. Interesting. Let's try some brown here. The distress ink walnut would be good too. Walnut stain. I think I want to just use the same tip here that has the red in here, okay? Okay, that is a reddish brown, and I'm putting it underneath these trees, to kind of cast a little bit of a stronger shadow underneath the trees, right? What this looks like is when I'm kind of going like this. I'm working the side, not this. Okay, I'm just working the side. I have my applicator kind of at an angle through most of this process here. It's just more of like a little hatching type of, type of motion. It just gives me a more narrow and a smaller application of that given color when doing it that way, when holding my tool that way. I love the brown. Okay, I'm using the brown, not the walnut stain right now. I do love this Marvy brown. I usually don't recommend specifics, in terms of browns and whatnot, and specific lines, but the brown is a pretty good one to go with. Marvies are not being sold in pad form anymore, but you can get a blank pad and the reinker for it, and you won't be disappointed, in my opinion, with that blue or brown. There's certain blues I like in the market too, or you can just go with the reinker, and you saw my little, palette area or whatever, the lid of a pad, and you can just put a couple drops of re-inker fluid and just sop up and apply it that way. You know, the only thing you really need a pad for is if you're going to stamp an image, you know, in a given color. You know, then you need the pad to apply that ink to the stamp with. But otherwise, re-inker will do, and re-inker, gosh, even with your favorite colors, they just last forever. Black, you know, if it's black, it tends to go a little bit faster, but even with black, I'm rarely tossing out a re-inker bottle. I can't even remember the last time I, you know, ran out of ink on something. And, you know, I used to use re-inkers in my workshops too, so you know, you get 20, 30 people in a workshop. You're using a lot of ink, but still, even with all that, hardly ever tossing anything out. Okay, brown. That was a little bit too bright of a red, so we'll kind of mellow that out here. Some brown tones. Alright, let's take a look at that walnut stain. And I'll just use my same tip right here. I think the walnut stain's a little bit lighter. Yeah, let me see. Let me get some. Oh, there was a lot of brown in that. Oh, look at that. The more I stamp it now, there's more red. It's like I said, stamp pad on a stick. It can really hold a pretty good amount of ink here. Okay, see that right there? Okay, so here's the walnut stain. Let me take a look. Let me see. Ooh. It's I don't know. It's a little bit drier, so I might not see much of a result from this. Yeah. Okay. I don't see anything. Maybe I'll see it in the rocks. Okay. Actually, that looks pretty good. I can see a slight kind of warm glow from this color. Yeah, okay. I see it up here more, not in the trees. The trees are a little more intense at this point in time. Okay. Oh, where's my dark brown? Here's my dark brown. Marquee pad, okay. Hitting my shadows again. Kind of just doing the same routine. I'm kind of sticking a lot with the convention that was established in the gray and black. Okay, I'm just kind of filling out a little bit more now with, you know, all these other colors that are being applied, okay? But by and large, it's, you know, the same kind of color scheme, or lighting scheme, shading scheme, it's all that. With those first couple toning colors that were applied in the form of black and gray. Still trying to retain some of those lighter areas by just not coloring them out with the darker tones, medium and darker tones. Okay. I'm thinking about other types of things like, you know, the lighting scheme that I have working in here at this point in time too, because now I've gone through the lighter tones and now I'm kind of back into the darker, you know, the darker values, so I can kind of start refining or kind of expanding on the shading and lighting within the scene. Okay, so I think just in general, I think I want to make this ledge in certain areas a little bit darker, just to make the areas down here seem a little bit lighter by contrast, okay? So, where it's dark, I'll apply more darker hue. I don't have to do it everywhere again. I don't want to do it everywhere because I like some of the lighter things that are happening in here. I'm looking forward to using my gel pen set and alcohol pens on here that I didn't have before. There's a few more options and kind of more detail oriented types of things that can be done. Okay, that was dark brown. Let's go all the way to black, okay? Now I've established a lot just, you know, in the beginning, you know, with the black, you know, shadows and everything like that, but like I said, we're all the way back to this now, so I can kind of further expand on certain things. I can darken up things a little bit more now that I know kind of lighting scheme a little bit more and coloring scheme in the given piece. You can go in and refine, expand, redefine maybe if need be. See this, if I'm making this ledge here a little bit darker than this area right here, you know, might stand, you know, separate from this ledge a little bit more, so in terms of the space. Visual space, not actual space. Actual space, this is all two-dimensional here. Everything is flat, you know, and the same distance, right? So it's all kind of the illusion of that given space is the only thing we're working with. So you can do that by many things, and contrast is certainly a very strong tool that can be used for that purpose in defining the different planes within a, you know, given location scene. No, I really like that area up there now. Okay, let's try to create a little bit more space space within a given space, a given area. Just using that one boulders with lichen over that entire field there, you know, gave everything a certain type of patterning to that. So this is where you kind of eradicate, hopefully, some of that patterning by bringing in kind of a more diverse kind of lighting, shading area. You know what I mean? It just means to darken up some areas and leave some areas lighter, okay? And then the similarity between all of those repeated impressions will, you know, hopefully kind of not be as apparent. It'll really subdue that kind of that visual. Alright, so coming around, see this kind of ledge, how it's kind of getting a little bit further established. That white kind of looks weird in there right now, but I have plans for it. Okay, this is where that kind of that hazy mist will be established in a couple areas, so I need to retain the white. Otherwise, it, you know, like a white light coming out of this area doesn't make sense in, you know, if you don't retain some of the white of the page, you know, the paper. But my ledge is really coming around now, that space. Alright, so let's bring in a little bit of this black too, underneath the trees. Let's give it a pretty decent shadow area. Underneath the trees, I loved hiking underneath the trees in Maine after the storm came through one day, because I thought I would miss. I thought, oh my gosh, all the leaves are going to fall off these trees, but you know, during that storm. But when I hiked through those trails, all those beautiful leaves, not all of them, but a lot of them, I wouldn't be surprised if 30% fell off the trees. But I was now walking on a carpet of, you know, that beautiful color. The colors really reminded me of Fruity Pebbles, the color scheme. So if you're kind of wondering about kind of a color scheme, I don't know, bring up a, you know, type into a search engine, Fruity Pebbles, and maybe someone will have a photograph of, you know, a bowl of them or something like that. Yellows, pinks, kind of a violet, I think. Okay, so kind of establishing a little bit more of the shadows up there, that kind of kind of dried and dulled a little bit. All right. All right, now before I come into this, this piece with some alcohol markers, I'll need to allow this dye-based ink to dry. These inks are really spreading around a lot more because of that first peach Bellini that I've laid down. I can tell, just kind of going into these places that I haven't colored. In some of these areas, it still has a little bit of that peach Bellini kind of moisture. So that kind of foundation layer is really serving its purpose. Serving its purpose as far as establishing a nice coated surface by which to apply our other inks over the top of in a nice smooth manner where the inks will spread very nicely for us. It's like kind of applying inks on kind of like wet glass or something like that. It really just, spreads out beautifully. I'm getting a little bit darker over here. I'm trying to be more gutsy and, because I have so much space, I can go quite a dark field, that's quite big in a given area, just because the scene is so huge. Alright, so like a little smear there. I think my fingers are getting really moist. Alright, let me try to get a little bit darker here. Let me go across some of these little smudgy little fingerprints. Interesting, I'm kind of digging into that tone on the top, and it's kind of giving me almost that kind of that alcohol blender touch there, technique, from having so much color on there. Okay, so, Alright, I'm loving my ledge and my rocks, and my rocky ledge here, my kind of summit location rocks. But I think I need to wait for this to start drying a little bit. But let's take a look here. I have to kind of bend this to get it out of that glare. The lights. Here's these different tones down here. See those different tones, and then you see some greens and ochres and a little hint of some red here and there. See that? Look at that deep, kind of glowing orangish tinge underneath that. There's a little bit of that red up there. There's a little bit more red here. You see how that kind of brings this whole space here, and you have something to relate to down here. Alright, so we'll allow this to dry, and then we'll come into this area with some, I don't know, possibly some different imagery, but definitely some different colors of pens and whatnot. Looking at these oranges and greens, tan, I don't know, kind of neutrals, not neutrals, but very light. And then we'll apply some of that and take it from there, okay? But those alcohol pens, this is so wet now, when I'm touching the sides here, I'm kind of getting some fingerprints everywhere. I can't avoid it. This thing is so big. Well, I guess I can. I can turn it like this instead of like this, but I don't know. Sometimes I forget. All right, so, great. Almost there on this one, though, as far as that color scheme goes, and then it's kind of applying some special effects, and then the scene will essentially be done, I think. There we have it. Step number whatever coming next. Okay, back. Might be about an hour later. And taking a look at the scene, seeing how it dried, seeing what the color intensity looks like on here. And it looks pretty good. One of the things I was thinking about, though, was the areas of water here, in terms of the intensity of it, okay? I did a video, it's been a while ago, but it was talking about the different aspects of color, hue, intensity, value, and temperature. And one of the things I like to do in my scenes is I like to keep things fairly balanced, okay? They don't have to be perfectly in balance, but I want some aspects of the piece to be somewhat matched with the rest of the imagery and areas especially in a scene select. So in here, where this color is starting to become a little bit more intense in here, in terms of the, these bright reds and whatnot, I like to bring some of that into my other areas, okay? It doesn't have to be the same color, but somewhat of the same intensity, okay? So in here, like down in this water, the waters are kind of a distinctly more muted color scheme within those spaces, okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test, and see if kind of a brighter color, I'm using the number 10 Marvy Blue here, if this won't kind of bring that up a little bit, okay? Let's see if I can zoom in here. Just in terms of the vibrancy of some part of that area. So just bringing in some of this blue. It's a little bit brighter. Okay. And it could be just a hint of it somewhere too, okay? But I think that I'll do it on one side, and I'll leave the other side as is, just so you can see this brighter blue over here. This is a little bit more dull. Okay? Not dull in terms of interest, but dull in terms of the intensity, the relative brightness of a color, okay? Remember, bright doesn't mean light. It's the intensity of it. Sometimes the darker colors are the brighter colors of a given area. Like shadows or something like that can be very bright. Okay, so I have some of that down here, and maybe because that water is closer to us, maybe it's going to be kind of a more intense color. Maybe I'll bring some of this into this area too. Just kind of a little hint of it, a layer of it in the shadows. Okay. Yeah. That looks okay. Not bad. Fairly subtle. But a little bit more kind of the spirit of the rest of the piece. Okay, so the water is done, largely done. And we have these areas in here. This area right in here is looking a little bit dull to me, but you know, we do have some plans for that. I've really been thinking about this leaves stamp and bringing some of this into it. I'm not sure how that will stamp out over the top of this. I know it'll be transparent though, so the colors underneath will show through. But let me see if I have a good color for that. I want to go with a really intense red. I don't think it'll look good if I just stamp it out on there. So I'll stamp it out, then I'll have to kind of blend it in after it dries with a little bit more tone. Okay, so let's just go for it. I've been thinking about this, and I love kind of ground cover color in a given setting. Not even just in a scene, I'm talking about out in nature too. Okay, so you got this leaf stamp here. I tell you what, I'm going to. This is a cherry red right here. Let me see if I have a pen version. Okay, this is a number 46. This is the crimson red, which will do. Yeah, both of these are crimson. We used to use 46 all the time on our things that we used to color out at a Stamp of the Hand company when I used to work for them. Anyway, this pen's really dry. It's brand new though. This is, in terms of usage, this is a really super old pen, but I can reconstitute it by just popping out the back and adding some water. But what I'll do is I'll add in some re-inker fluid of that number 46, and it'll be fine again. Okay, so let's just not go with just red on here, okay? Let's bring black onto it, and I'll show you how I do this right here. Okay, forgive me if I work off screen, I'll try to remember. Okay, so when I color that, that's all black right now. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of run this, and I'm kind of rolling this like this a little bit. So I'm not just applying some color, but I'm kind of rolling off some of that black that's already been applied to those leaves. I'm not trying to get every leaf colored red now, okay? I'm just trying to bring in this element of it, so it's kind of a mixture, so it's kind of like a dark black red, you know, like a vampire movie blood red or something like that. But see, that black should be able to harmonize in with the surrounding area a little bit more. Okay, let's take a look here. See what it looks like, okay? Now, if you watched my first video on the composition here, what I'll be doing is I'll be masking off some spaces. Let's grab a larger mask. And we'll be bringing this into it. Let's bring it in down here, though, first, okay? I'll come in from it's a darker area, and I'll work it into the lighter area. Some areas a lighter area. Where it goes into the lighter areas, maybe it'll read more as pure red, I don't know. We'll just see what type of mixing occurred during that, that pen work process. Okay. Here it is down there. It'll stand out a little bit more and it'll blend in when it dries, but there it is like that. See that? See in the context of the overall. I do like it. I think I want a little bit more black though. Okay. So what I'll probably do is I'll probably layer this with some more black imagery, but we'll do it in the VersaFine in the very end. So this will be not the foreground, but it'll be pushed back a little bit, so it'll look a little bit different. All right. Let's go for some more of this. Throughout, okay? Alright, that being said, taking into mind what I just saw, I'll color less of this plant with the red, so it'll be a little bit of a darker red, I think, not having wiped off so much. That was kind of my test print there. It was a test print on the scene, but I stamped it in a darker area. Okay, and let's go down about, how about right here? I'll bring some of that in. Go like so. Actually put little bug bite holes into several of these little leaves. It's not something that registers kind of visually, you know, I think, consciously. But I think those little types of details like that kind of add up to an overall kind of scene resolution in terms of kind of a finished quality that does kind of add to this overall, I don't know, kind of feel of the piece in terms of kind of the details in nature. Oops, this one's like that dry one here. Let me put this on the side. But all those things, in my opinion, really add up to an overall kind of more full looking kind of visual statement. Alright, so we have that down there. Look at that. See those leaves down there? Is that little splash of color? Doesn't that kind of add to this overall? Okay, a little splash of it right there. We kind of just used a small portion of it from here up on that impression. That sure does help, though, I think. It kind of gives this area here something a little bit more in relation to down there. Yeah, it's just kind of nature, you know. What do they say? There's nothing... what's that thing about nature, and there's no two things alike, but there's, you know, maybe on a very small level, but there's a lot of repetition in terms of kind of more, you know what I mean, general types of shapes and colors and whatnot. I always kind of found it strange that, I don't know, like certain cacti out in the desert are, you know, given color. I don't know, maybe they... I don't know if color, you know, animals are colorblind, but maybe, I don't know, maybe they radiate a certain not heat, but I forgot the word I'm looking for. you know, in terms of the light reflecting off of it. That maybe animals can see better or something like that, or register better in terms of what that plant can provide for them. I was just out in... I'm thinking about this because I was just out in Joshua Tree, and my favorite plant to this date is I love red ball cactus. And I don't know, they have such an intensity. It's kind of like a reddish pink color when they're smaller. And then when they get bigger, they're a little bit less of that, you know, that intensity. But I don't know, I always kind of marvel at them. Sometimes I'll only see one like for miles around. And then some, they're kind of like in communities of them, you know, with a little bit more of them, but they definitely have their space. Okay, let's see. This area is looking really quite plush. Sometimes we've been trying to hike off trail to certain summits that don't have a trail going up to them, and a lot of times, sometimes there's this like the fortress of this barrier of foliage around it. It's like you really can't find the route to get to these summits, and sometimes you have to kind of walk, you know, very carefully over like a very thick bush or something like that, and hopefully they don't kind of punch through in areas. So I can use, I'm saying that because I can use quite a bit of this if I want to on here, and I don't think it would look out of place from a natural standpoint. I don't want it to look cluttered in terms of a visual standpoint in a, you know, scenic stamping or something like that, but you know, you can use quite a bit of that. Okay, so starting to come around. See that? And I think at this point in time, I mean, I think it's been that way for a while, but I think we've completely eradicated this, you know, that visibly, you know, noticeable repetition of shape. I mean, I can see this rock here, here, and here are the same, but they're kind of different values, and there's other things around them. I've shaded some areas, so it's not quite as a, you know, like a distracting type of element within the piece. So I try to make each design to where, you know, if it is supposed to be kind of more of a filler image, and it's not supposed to be something that's, you know, a lot of attention is brought to, I try to design it where there's variation, where if you stamp it once, it's not boring, but if you stamp it several times, it's not so picket fence-ish where it looks so similar. So I try not to leave too many landscapes within the design, and that's a really tricky type of thing in designing stamps, you know, that are to be used in a repetitive type of manner. But in something like this, where I have to stamp it 20 times, it's just like, you know, you're bound to see that type of patterning somewhere in there, and very visible. But again, where you kind of eradicate that is you treat different areas within that given space in a little bit of a different way throughout it. So, okay, I'm loving this stamp right here. It's working exactly the way I had hoped. I've used this before, but I've just not used these stamps so many times in one piece before, so I'm seeing things, you know, for the first time here in a certain type of way. And that's what you always want to see. Hopefully things work as good as you had hoped they would, but you hope they work even better than you hoped they would. And only time can really tell from that point of view, you know, that aspect of it. Okay, I've added some more down here just to give that a little bit of variation. Can't really see it too much, but so you can kind of see a little bit more there. Light. Oh boy. Let's try something here. Let's go with this leaf here, and let's do this. You know how leaves kind of change colors, right? Let's do black. Let's do some red, where we're doing, you know, a little bit of red, or a lot of red. And let's go for something like a green, okay? Let's go for a dark green. So here's this one's just called green from Marvian, and let me just kind of mix that in here. It's fairly dark. I don't know if it'll read green, and maybe it looks just black, I don't know. But let's get a little bit of variation in here. So we get this kind of, hopefully, this little bit of a spirit of things changing, so we have that, you know, that brush down there, but, you know, it's varied. Okay, let's try some right over here. At this point in time, I almost don't even need a mask. It's just looking so full and layered in here. Okay. So we get a little bit of green here and here. Okay. This is going to look really spectacular in that black when we add that in there. I hope. That's kind of the concept of it. We'll see. Oops. I just wiped this off. I got paper towel all over my tack and peel there. Let me just cover this up. We'll use this later again, but I think that's it for now with that brush. Okay, so this is really quite wet down there. That was, you know, really juicy pad. You can see kind of where it's wet in the impressions. See that right there? See how it kind of stands out against that background? It's because this is wet and that's dry. So that will merge, and, you know, in the end, we're going to spray this too. But let's go with some different tones of inks up here. I'm going to flip this around because I don't want to touch it there, and I'm going to be working like this, okay? So this is the way I end up doing demonstrations a lot of times when I'm at conventions. Everyone's on that side of the table, so I kind of work upside down through a lot of the process here. Okay, so alcohol inks. Doesn't matter what brand it is. Go for your, you know, the different tones and values that you want. This should come into some areas and give a little bit of brightness and specific, you know, areas to be colored in a little bit easier. I don't even know what I'm saying here. I'm going to be coloring in certain areas, and there are certain areas kind of get a little bit dull, okay, when they dry. But like I said, when you spray these, then you'll get that kind of vibrancy and intensity back. But I can get very specific, of course, with a pen here. And what I'm doing is I'm going in, this is a very light value. of yellow, okay? So it's not very bright, and it's not very dark as well, okay? So it's a good one to start off with, you know, just go in there. It does start warming things up, though, pretty good. You know, when you layer this over your dye-based inks, it shouldn't blur any of your dye-based inks, because they're different binders, okay? One's water and one's alcohol, so they won't mix. Now, I mean, you might have a certain type of black pad. When it dries, it kind of dries on the surface a little bit more and does less staining, and, you know, there isn't as much absorption, so, you know, if I go over it with yellow, there's a chance that, you know, you could kind of drag in some of that dried up dye-based ink on the surface, but most of the times, especially if you let it set up and dry like we did on the hair, it won't blur anything, and you don't have to worry about that. Okay, so it's kind of getting a little bit more vibrant in some areas. Well, I don't know if you can tell. It is somewhat subtle. Okay. Add some in your rocks again. Remember that continuity issue. Okay. Alright, let's try. Alright, this one is called Pale Yellow. This one is called Melon Yellow. Let's test it out. Maybe it's more slight orange in it, maybe, I don't know. Yeah, there's a slight orangeness to it. It's very nice. But I start kind of light like this, and see, I'm not coloring in. It's not like, okay, there's a tree, color the whole thing, you know. I'm just kind of bringing it in, little splotches of it here and there. We have a lot of the color already established anyways with the use of the dye-based ink applications that we did. So it's kind of an oscillation of intensity, value. You know, there's clouds coming by. Some things are, you know, brighter than others. Not that we have to reference nature. You can kind of, you know, another kind of thing I say is to kind of keep it like a, you know, a set. You know, it's like a stage set. But that being said, you, as the lighting director of your piece, can establish, you know, just what you want your viewers to look at. You know, it could be a uniform background where, you know, more attention is brought to the stars of the stage. You don't want the background to be such a huge kind of visual statement that it detracts from, you know, whatever's going on with the actors. But you know, you can oscillate things. You can, you know, have more of the center stage or something like that with the values a little bit, or the intensity a little bit brighter, and things on the side, or maybe duller. I don't know. You can do various things like that. Okay, this is a pretty bright color. It's apple green, right? So let's come in here in the shadows and do a little coloring in there. Kind of lost some of the greens that I applied down there, you know, by putting in the ochres and whatnot over the top of it. But I want some of that back in there. Bring some of it up in the trees, maybe. If you have Copic markers, you probably have a blender. Going to lay down some colors, go back in and blend it in a little bit more. What this looks like, what I'm doing, is I'm kind of going like this, you know, little squiggles here and there, like that. Okay, see how much it stands out against that background, but when you're applying it over color, those colors underneath are showing through, so it's not a true representation of just this color as if it were on white paper. It's always going to be some kind of mix, because alcohol inks are transparent as well as dye-based inks. So while they don't mix, they kind of merge optically, because it's like putting a transparent layer of something over the top of something, another color, where that color shows through. Alright, it's kind of coming around and terms of our intensity. I think this color might look great down here too, but let's wait on that. It's a little wet there. Okay, I have these foreground trees down here. I think I forgot to bring in some of that yellow. Let's go back to the pale yellow here. Kind of kicking up the brightness a little bit, and I can kind of get closer to the water, the top of the tree, where, you know, top of the tree meets water. Top of the trees are kind of blue anyway, you know, because, you know, I ran some of the color into those trees anyway. Okay, let's go back to that melon. It's, you know, kind of good to be done with your dye-based ink coloring before you get to these alcohol inks. You can kind of go into them a little bit, but, you know, once you lay down these alcohol inks, it kind of creates a layer on the surface of your paper. And where they're, you know, your dye-based inks might not be able to apply to the top of that alcohol very easy, you know, so it's, you know, just in general, you know, it's good to get most of that out of the way. Okay. Trying to think of what I want to do. I definitely want to kick up some intensity in a couple areas with, or the value range with some really dark impressions in there in black with that VersaFine. But I think we can go into our moving some stuff around here. I got my pads everywhere. Okay. Kind of counter bending this right here. All right. This area in here needs a little bit more color too. I'm trying to think what color though can it handle. Yeah, I figured out. Oh, well, gel pens for sure. Okay, let's see. Let's get into some colors that we can use. Picking out some colors out of my gel pen set that are kind of in the spirit of this scene here. I do have a unboxing video of a gel pen set. I don't want to bring it over here because I got a bunch of other stuff in front of it, but it's the Shuttle Art 180 color set, so I have a lot of options to choose from in terms of different values within a given color scheme. So there's several, you know, lime greens from a very light, dull one to kind of a brighter, darker one. But I'm just kind of grabbing these out here, and I think these will, you know, these are the ones I'll start off with. I do want to bring in some kind of more shimmery looking oranges, like maybe this one for my trees down here. Okay, let's see what I can do with this. All right. Okay, I definitely need to move some stuff around here. Get some of my alcohol pens out of the way. Alright, so I've mentioned this in other videos, but gel pens of different brands tend to work a little bit differently, okay? The ones that most people, including myself, were used to were the kind of craft industry ones, okay? Crafting is an arts and crafts, not the cheese. Some people used to think I was talking about the cheese when I'd say, well, I make craft rubber stamps, okay? So I thought, so you're making kind of stamps for the craft, the craft company. Anyway, that's getting sidetracked there. But those crafting store, ones that you typically buy in a crafting store, they're usually a nice, really good quality, like a Uniball, okay, pen. And those ones are, they're more expensive. Usually, what, $2 or $3 a pen. And that's what we use most of the time. But with the popularity of things like the whole hobby of adult coloring books, there's a big industry, like for those pens that I had right here, these alcohol pens. I think there's one company that makes a ton of different companies' pens for them because it has the same barrel. It's just a different brand on it. But now there's like gigantic gel pen sets. Now we saw them in the past, like years and years ago, like gigantic gel pen sets, and a lot of you know, just like me, how long they lasted for. But these ones, they seem to have gotten the formula down where they're not getting clogging and, pens that just never worked, even brand new. And it's because the ink is a little bit thinner, or a lot thinner, than inks like the Uniball Sigma, okay? So I like them both because if I apply some of this color down, it's a little bit more translucent because it's thinner. And, the colors underneath show through. That being said, I'd like to have some opaque ones as well, but different tools for your different purposes. Okay, so where I'm applying some of this gel pen, I'm using a lighter color, okay, than some of the colors that I've already applied. So I'm kind of applying it on the top sides of things. So if you see a little, like a clumpy little like bush, all right. Let me see if I have that stamp right here still. Well, I don't have it here still, but just as an example, like the top sides of my clusters right here. You see how I've defined the top side of a cluster with a shadow in the back of it. All right, like on the top sides of these, I would be applying my highlights because you shade in the darker areas and you highlight the top areas, okay? So that's what I'm doing here within all these little spaces. There's like these little clumps, and on the top sides of them I'm putting a few little highlights like that. The darker the area, the less highlights I apply because it's just, it would stand out too much. By putting in highlights, you're seeing that light is hitting that area, so if the area is really dark, chances are you wouldn't be having any highlights because it would be all in shade. Okay, see that kind of coming around? It looks kind of weird, if you apply it in a couple different parts, only. You kind of have to do it on the overall, so it becomes a uniform texture running through things, okay? And you're saying that that's how kind of light affects a certain thing. So if light affects a certain thing in a certain way in one area, if that similar light hits another area the same way, then you'll have that, in theory, same type of visual, reflection of the other area. So, similar light, similar textures, okay? So if I just put a couple little dots right on this little bush right here, but not anywhere else, it might kind of stand out, unless that was the only area that was lit, and there are other areas are dark. But if it's kind of similar, all along, then, kind of keep it consistent, and it won't kind of stand out as, some kind of odd texture that we see in that area. Okay, so here's these foreground ones here. I'm going to usually start it in an area that's roughly the same value. And then I'll kind of bring it into those darker areas where it kind of stands out a little bit more. Okay, now this isn't the only color. We have a lot of different colors that we can utilize, and I don't know if on every video and scene I would do that, but I mean this one's kind of big and I've spent a lot of time, so I might as well, use, whatever colors might look good in that area. This one kind of stands out a little bit, so I need to bring in some oranges and whatnot. Alright, I have no idea what color this is. These are not marked, but it's just kind of some beige color. Here's some kind of yellowish color, real similar to that previous one, but this one's probably a little bit more yellowy. It has a little bit of a warmer tinge to it, which will be good. If you ever put down some area of dots that you don't like, you can always just kind of let it dry, or even before it dries, just take a little paper towel or something, napkin, and just buff it right off. It'll come right off if you're working on glossy cardstock. On matte cardstock, I'm not really quite sure. It might. It depends on which one you're going with. If it's a kind of a smooth matte coating, actually coated paper, it would probably come off. So sometimes I put down too many. And I think, I don't like that, and I just kind of rub it off. Starting to bring this area to life a little bit. See where that kind of separation is happening now. It was kind of all dull before. I mean, there was some variations of color, but this is starting to kind of shimmer a little bit more. See that? Those little dots down there. I haven't brought it in here yet. Let's do this area. Little area. Okay, so right in here it gets a little bit boring, I think. So let's bring some of this in. And bring a little bit of life to that area. I'm starting to get some of that red ink right here from, these little bushes down here. It's still really quite wet down here. Gosh, I should wait till this dries a little bit. It's so hard, though. I really want to work on this piece. I guess I use a lot of ink, and seeing this big. Here's some pink, here's some pink Uniball. This one's a really bright orange, too, right? Let's try it. Let's go in with the pink here. Let's see if it's even working. Some of my pens do not work. I don't know. They're really old. Okay, this one's working fine. I have another one just like it that doesn't seem to be working. I can probably get it working. I just kind of whack it a few times, and most of the times it starts working again. But okay, now this pink is a much darker pink than, say, those two colors that I just used. So it's actually darker. But I am going to kind of incorporate it in with those lighter areas. Okay, let's go into an orange. Very bright day glow orange. But we'll put it over the top of some other areas that are already kind of that hue. So it doesn't read as like a day glow orange as it would just on a piece of white paper, but we're using the vibrancy of it in order to kind of enhance and make more dimensional areas with that given hue where that already exists. So in other words, I'm not putting orange into blue or something like that. I'm putting orange into red, which relates very well to it. And it's just so it looks a little bit more dimensional. We want this thing to really kind of show. This one's really bright right here. Okay. Oops, sorry. I mean, this really mixes in. I mean, you don't have to be... This is not a precarious type of thing. I can go like this. I mean, that's not a good way to work, but it just comes to show you, when you're putting down these little tiny dots like that, you know what I mean? It's an easy exercise, at least in terms of something like this. What these pens were conceived for was coloring in specific areas, like for adult coloring books. But the way we're using it, it's a little bit more kind of varied and kind of left up to the interpretation of the individual, but it is not a precarious kind of type of process here. So you don't need to worry about anything like that. I mean, I certainly don't. I mean, down here, you know what I mean? Don't do that, but that's just to come to show you that you can, do the worst possible thing and it's not going to kind of destroy a piece. I think I want some more yellows up here, though. Okay, and I can do that. Being that we have the Shuttle Art 360 set, 180 colors of all types, metallics, glitter, pastels, whatnot. Okay. Kind of coloring in a little bit. I want some areas to kind of really kind of pop out. Not whole things like, oh my god, that tree is really popping out, but just little areas of light and color. Okay, like that. A little bit more. Here's a kind of a brilliant yellow. I'm really able to use my set here in all kinds of different colors. This is like the brilliant yellow, the number 43 Marvy one. I don't think I used it on here though. I don't. Yeah, it's at the bottom of my stack. I know I didn't pull it out. Okay, this one is. It's a little bit more golden. Let's test it out. Let's take a look. Let's bring some of it down here into this grass too. Okay, so we have some intensity working in here now. Let's go down here in the foreground. It really popped out that tree, that's for sure. Coming together, little by little. Alright, here's a... I don't know if I need that blue. Textures. Common textures for continuity, okay? This water in here is looking pretty good, so I don't think I need very much of this, or want very much of this, but let's see if I can show you right here. Kind of the transition where light meets dark like this. I'll come in and I'll bring in some of these little dots like this. I'll keep it really subtle, so I'm going with the shuttle art one as opposed to the Uniball Signo. Uniball Signo is a little bit more opaque. Shuttle art one's cheaper, thinner inks, whatnot, but a little bit more translucent, so when those little, dots dry, it'll kind of blend in with that. So I'm kind of adding some around where light meets darker tones, and then just kind of transitioning it out like this, spacing out my dots, okay? So I can kind of go over my little fingery, smudgy fingerprints too. A little bit. But having this little shimmer down here adds that little sparkle to your water surface that is, present in light on liquid types of situations. You get that little sparkle kind of coming off the, the surface. They call that, in photography, that's called specular light. It's light that's brighter than white. And it kind of gives it a little bit more, maybe, surface and dimension by adding this on there. See, this could easily be clouds up here, just like, up here, right? But when you put this texture into it, you're differentiating this area that's the same exact texture as sky, but you're differentiating it with a little bit more texture, the addition of some texture. Okay, where light meets dark. These pens are about like a dime each or 13 cents each or something like that. It was hard for me to calculate because it comes with refills for every color, so, you know. But it's something like that. It's really inexpensive, you know, to get a really full range of color. Okay, let me see if I can zoom in here, or if this will focus, and you can see those little dots. Let's try camera. Okay, come on. Here we go. Okay, so these little dots in there coming out from that right in here. And see, I dissipated out here. You know, I put more space in me. You can see a lot of them right here. You can really see my fingerprints there. Okay. I didn't put any out there. Maybe it's okay, but that's kind of what's going on there. Okay. No idea what color this one is. It's kind of, well, it's lime green. Let's bring a little bit. This one might be the metallic. They don't look like metallic though. There's a different top right here. I don't want to really want the glitter one. Okay, here we go. It's kind of day glow green. Bring some of that down here into this grassy area. Not wanting it that color, but if you just kind of put a few little highlights, it just becomes a little bit of that color kind of incorporated into that area. I'm going to do some things on these rocks here, but that foliage is just too wet right now, so I can't really do that yet. I tell you what, but in the meantime, let's do some other things in here. Okay, now down here, I got that glare. Right in here, we've lost a lot of distinction in terms of the image itself, okay? That's the autumn bank left and right in here. Okay, things get a little muddled in here, okay? With all that color. I kept it fairly separate, but it's a little bit muddled, so what I do is we don't do anything to that, but we just introduce a nice crisp impression of something right over the top of it. Now this is the one I really like to use in here, because I have some kind of dead trees interspersed within those designs themselves, so this is just kind of going with another element of it, and this comes in that autumn set that we have, where we have all these grouped in a set. But I've included this piece here because I like using it in conjunction with these pieces right here, from what I've found using it. Okay, I like a lot of that color in there, but I lose some of the crisp shapes in there, so I'm just going to reintroduce this in terms of a nice crisp shape right over the top of all that coloring that's happened. Okay? Holding down a little bit longer because of all that color that we have underneath there, plus gel pens. Okay, so I don't know if you can see that. Okay, so there's a tree right in here. Boy, I would love to be able to do the versifying right in here. But if I did that, I wouldn't be able to bring in some pigment ink that I'm going to do later on, because the pigment inks just sit right on the surface of the paper. And if I bring in like a white pigment ink and I apply it over the versifying black pigment ink, it'll definitely smear it. You know, the black would start moving around. I think, you know, maybe I might be able to heat set it and it would be a little bit more fixed, but I don't want to play around with that. Okay, so adding a little bit more in there, and oops, sorry. Keep zooming in and out of this piece right here and working off screen, but there's a couple trees right in there. They don't stand out too much. When I spray them, hopefully they'll pop a little bit more. Okay, so let's take this, and this is one place you will be able to see it. If I have these trees back in the distance like that, let's pop another one in here, a little bit closer to us. And just using the top of it, just masking off some of those other maple pear tops. Okay, see that little branch right in there. Kind of gives us a little bit of a kind of a feeling of history, you know, in terms of life and death of the forest. You know, you have new trees, old trees, young trees, new growth, old growth, dead, you know, dead elements in there too. So it's just popping out right down here to mimic what's going on back there. I mean, you can't really see it. It's kind of a subtle little thing. But, alright, so, drying time. Let's see, yeah. That red pad is really juicy, so. Getting there, alright. A little bit more gel pen maybe, I'm not quite sure. But definitely some gel pen work in here to kind of mimic the textures of lichen and moss growing on rocks and whatnot. Gosh, I've got this glare here. I don't know why it's so glary. Maybe it's just because I have a gigantic piece of paper. I think right in here I've kind of positioned my light so that it's not glary right here, so I might have to move them back a little bit farther. That is a gigantic piece. Okay. That is really wet right in here. Alright, back again. Taking a look at the piece, and earlier I was thinking I need to get some brighter tones in here after I stopped shooting, and kind of more in the spirit of that photograph that I showed in the last video towards the end. I need to get some more of that kind of brighter green in the picture, kind of like that, you know, real green lichen. Kind of take advantage of the kind of more of the spirit of the boulders with lichen design in here, and just to, I don't know, just to get some kind of a little bit more of a I don't know, kind of some visual excitement maybe in the form of you know, kind of a brighter, bolder tone. Okay, so going in here and adding some of that element in here. Okay, so it's already kind of waking it up a little bit, wouldn't you say? And this is a yellow-green. It's pretty bright tone in terms of the intensity. So now it's kind of waking up that area. Now, when this dries, it's going to kind of dry dull, so when I spray this, though, the intensity will kind of reappear. So, okay, let's add some of this down here as well. That's what it really kind of needed, didn't it? Let's get some down there. Let's get kind of bold with that. Let me zoom in a little bit so you can kind of see it happen a little bit closer, a little bit more closely. In theory, I mean, this area right in here, if there were some kind of really bright tones, they would be brighter than these ones way in the distance, just for the very nature of kind of proximity and how intensity would play into that. Just things, it's not, those colors aren't, light being reflected off the distant things aren't coming through so much, I don't know, sediments in the air. Okay, that's looking pretty good, I think. I would say that's just what the doctor ordered, so to speak. Yeah. Let's take a look at that as a whole. Okay. All right, now let's get a little variation in this area. I had to move my my lighting back because I was getting so much glare off the perimeter of my piece right here. See if I kind of go out there, it gets a little bit more glary, so I'm kind of working on a darker area, but that looks pretty close to, what this piece looks like in terms of my exposure on my camera here, so. All right, let's try a little bit. This one's one of my favorite colors. It's light green, okay? And it is pretty bright, okay? I like to use it on my grass, just to really give a deep vibrancy. It never looks like this because I'm always applying it over the top of other colors, but it never looks like, like that color right there. But it really serves its function as kind of a, well, it's not a base layer, but it is kind of really kind of blending in with all the other colors underneath it. So let's get more kind of green up on some of these rocks. Alright, that's going pretty bold with that tone, I should think. It's interesting. Okay, let's get some of this color down here as well, just to put it in a couple other areas. Alright, let's get back to some gel pen work. I've got gel pen additions to things like this. Let's try some different greens in those green areas, okay? Okay. This is so crazy working on these big pieces for the purpose of shooting a video. It's just I have to zoom in so close, and this is so huge. It's really easy for me to kind of get sidetracked or kind of lost in the piece, and then I forget, I'm doing like, the workout here or something like this, But I will try to stay focused and keep the piece within visuals. Okay, so, oh boy, I don't even know if you can see what I'm doing here, or trying to. This piece is practically in my lap, when it's out working on some parts of this. Okay, so I'm just going in and adding some of this kind of little scratchy little texture. What I'm doing is I'm going like this, kind of adding that little splotchiness, to the textures that are already down there, okay? Just to give, some variation and kind of a three-dimensional, an attempt at three-dimensional types of textures. Just to make it look a little bit more layered. Now I'm adding this green in areas where the value of the color that's already been applied in those areas, they're real similar in terms of darkness, okay? I mean, you can see it right there a little bit more because that rock's a little bit lighter, all right? But I'm kind of adding it in areas where it kind of blends in, then I'll bring it into either darker or lighter areas. If it's real dark, then the green should stand up against it as a lighter value. But there's areas where it's really similar to the texture already down there, or to the value and color already laid down. Okay, so it's not, very noticeable as far as, something kind of actually changing down there. But it does have a slightly different hue, and if you look closely at it, someone would be able to notice that type of texture down there. Let me see if I can bring this up and you can see it a little bit more. Okay, see those green? So let me try to do this here. Just holding it. Okay, so kind of coming in here like that. I mean, you can get more varied too. There's not like any set type of little scratchy texture that you have to do. Hopefully I've kind of worked into the design, enough variation to where you can just kind of, you do whatever you want and for this thing to work. Okay, as far as from a textural standpoint. But these little types of things, okay, some of these little areas like this can be really subtle, but I was talking about it with someone, not talking, but responding to someone. They were saying, they really like the detail in the pieces, and that's one of those things. In illustration, okay, one of the things that always kind of occurred to me, when you're, you might have some kind of artwork and some kind of advertisement in a spread or something like that, and as someone's kind of flipping through a magazine or whatnot, you're just kind of flipping around, and what hopefully you can do is you can kind of catch their attention with the overall piece, okay? And then, if you can kind of retain their attention through a little bit of a further inspection by the viewer, you've really done your job, okay? So, and then if you really kind of get their attention and hold someone's attention, where upon further inspection, closer inspection, that viewer is rewarded by kind of more, subtle types of things going on within your visual, then that's good, Like I said, you want to reward someone for, kind of taking a closer look at your piece, your visual. And that's what it's all about, It's kind of capturing, and then retaining someone's attention. And then kind of, taking them on a little visual little ride throughout whatever thing you've created. So that's where all these little smaller details come in handy. And I think, when you do these types of things, there is an overall kind of I don't know, kind of a visual resonance, maybe, or something like, not sure that's the right word, but you want the piece to kind of buzz a little bit, from a visual standpoint. And all these little details kind of add up, I believe, to an overall kind of experience. Okay, so that was this green right here. It's kind of a yellow-green. It's kind of the same, or similar color to this one, wouldn't you say? This one's a little bit lighter. Maybe this one's closer to this one. It's somewhere in between, isn't it? But it relates, though. So that, I would say, is a good one to incorporate in. Oh, here's a yellow here. I don't know, maybe this one could be kind of a lighter version. Let's see if it's working here. Okay, no problem. Let's try to work this one into the mix. So I'll kind of work it in. Ooh, that one's really bright. It's kind of, let's see, this thing's flowing. I think it's so wet in there. Everything stays more moist on this paper for some reason. So I'm kind of clogging a little bit. It's not transferring. Yeah, okay. I don't know what's going on with that one. Let me try this one. Yellow. Kind of a pastel yellow signo. Here. Okay. Okay, better. Ooh, that one's really light, though. So it really stands out, so I'll use a little bit more sparingly unless I'm applying it in a fairly light area. So right in there, it really kind of stands out. So I'll probably use it a little bit more in the lighter area. Lighter area, more light is hitting it. So I can put lighter highlights in those areas. All right, we have some trees down here. Let's put a few highlights on those ones as well. Kind of brings, I was going to say a little bit visual interest to those areas. I think it brings a lot of visual interest to those areas to kind of reclaim light within kind of a darker area, or an area that just kind of lost its, its contrast. We had to apply it down there just to get it, get those rich tones kind of involved down there, but this is a way to go back and reintroduce some of that contrast back into the scene in those spaces. Okay, alright, I'm going to work upside down here, if you don't mind, because I need to be able to access these trees, and that little area is a little bit moist with all that green ink that I applied. So I'm applying it on the bottom side, which is really the top. Okay, this is what I need to do. I think I just need to take a piece of paper and just come over it like that. That's how I can kind of access this area right in here without putting my hand in that wet ink down below. Okay, so on the top sides of some of these little sedge banks, little shimmering little leaves. Kind of when you're walking underneath a canopy of backlit colored leaves, it's, to me, it's like I feel like I'm walking in a kind of a living stained glass piece. Okay, that's where we are here. Okay. Let me try to get a little bit closer here.